So there it is.
All right, let's get started. A cybersecurity buffet. Sounds like fun, right? Okay, so what we were going to go through today, a little bit just why we're here, what makes us passionate about what we're doing here. We'll talk about that. We were going to get into some specific steps to take to keep the business safe. We're going to talk about how this can affect our community. And when I say our community, obviously small, medium businesses. And as I mentioned, we have a specific particular focus on direct-to-consumer brands. And then we'll talk about how to be proactive in securing the technology as well. So first, in terms of why we are here, our founder, he started One Step 35 years ago, focused on small, medium businesses. I mean, 35 years ago, IT services was him making computers, building computers in his mom's garage. That literally is how he started the business. And he got exposed to retail in the form of installing computers at a retailer in Beverly Hills. Found some software that was one of the first softwares that helped a retail business manage their inventory and their customers and their sales. So we started getting involved with that, put the two hardware and software together, and really that was the genesis of the business. And that's where all of our focus has been on, is on that direct to consumer type of business. Now, a lot of those companies that we work with have wholesale, and they also have e-com, and they also have apps, and they also have brick and mortar. So it's kind of runs a gamut, but most of our focus is on the small to medium sized business. And unfortunately, we found that many of them aren't protected. They think it's not important enough, or they don't have the resources internally enough to do it. You can see the stats there. 56% do not have cybersecurity members in place. 68% do not have a disaster plan. And in the last few years, especially, this has become a really damaging thing to businesses. Less than 40% actually survive a breach. And that's why we're passionate about this. That's why I'm here. We worked hard to build the business, hard you guys worked to build your business. And the last thing we want to see is that destroyed potentially from something that is preventable. That is something that we can work on mitigating, let's call it. Preventable, maybe not in the long run, but mitigating the effects, making sure that the business survives, absolutely. But we'll talk about all the preventable stuff we can do too. So that's why we're here. We want to make sure that you're doing enough to secure your data, that you know what to do, that you can take steps to keep safe and secure. So let's talk about some of those steps. Number one, email education. The biggest source of breaches for small, medium-sized businesses is some type of an email breach. And Bob and I talked about this actually when we first were kind of getting to know each other. Like, do small, medium businesses really have to worry about this? They're not necessarily being targeted. And you're right, they're not. The main source of breach is something that comes into your inbox. And those aren't targeted to you. They throw out algorithms, they throw out emails all over the place. And they're just looking for the easy prey. And that is why small, medium-sized businesses are among the biggest hits. So starting off with email education is great. You got to know what are the latest threats, what are the newly identified viruses, make sure it's got notifications. We work with a tool that actually simulates phishing attacks. So yes, you got to get educated on it. You got to educate your staff on it, but we believe going a little bit farther. We have an AI-driven tool that actually learns kind of what you're susceptible to and will simulate those phishing attacks. And if you click on them, which I have too many times myself, you got to go through the training again. It's remediation training and back in school. So it just keeps it top of mind for employees. We're all busy, we're all multitasking. One wrong click and disaster can strike. So some steps to take to avoid phishing. Phishing is a cybercrime. It's targeting emails through targeting victims through fraudulent emails or texts or phone calls. The number one cause is email. 1 in 323 emails to small, medium-sized businesses are malicious. So that means that, judging if you guys are anywhere near my email traffic, you're probably getting several a week just on the average. There's an example of one, but some of them are very, very good. I've talked to small businesses that had, emails. A consistent thing that comes up is an email from a vendor They think it's from a vendor. It looks like it's from a vendor, and it just says click on this to pay your invoice, and it's got one character different. Or I read something recently, they're starting to use international characters like a C that looks so much like a C, but it's actually not. Next thing you know, you've paid that invoice, but it's not to your vendor. And I've heard that happen over and over and over again. So all of these things are just, you got to watch out for them, and having some tools in place to kind of keep that top of mind and keep you educated is important.
Can you give some other examples of what they do when they're with phishing? I mean, I'm a small company. I have 10 employees. What else are they going to do to me besides me paying a bill? Because I pay all the bills. So
yeah, I mean, there's a variety.
Other employees.
There's a variety of things that they could do. Interestingly enough, the average breach. So if the number one cause of breach is the email, keep that in mind. The average breach goes undetected for over 100 days. So a lot of times they have access to see your email, to see your accounts. They're maybe looking for other passwords they can in your email. And they're just looking for ways that they could get damaged. Sometimes you're going to have ransomware. That happens sometimes for sure, where your system will get shut down. Those numbers are definitely increasing a lot. In fact, I was reading something recently that more and more people are paying them, but cyber liability insurance policies are asking you guys to not pay them because it's reinforcing the bad behavior of paying them. I've had another company told me about their payroll. So somebody had been obviously breached into their system at some level, watched enough to see how and when they do their payroll. And one month they had a 3x payroll that didn't go to it just went to some other place. They stole that 3x their payroll. They may just look for information and sell it on the dark web. We'll talk about the dark web a little bit more here, but it's very rare that I would run a simple dark web scan on a company and not find something out there, some level of personally identifiable information, passwords. I don't know if I have it in this presentation, but if you're dealing with the direct consumer, it's from another presentation, but I'll try and remember it. If you're dealing with direct to consumer, your customer data has a value on the dark web. It has a value. So if they get your customer information, the average cost for a business to remediate and handle if they were breached is $242 per record. So if you have 5,000 customers, you can do the math. Those are just some of the things that they can do. Did I answer your question okay? Okay, I got it. Good. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Hey, Kevin, question.
Yeah.
When you say an email, like an email can be live in your account for like several months
Let me
before it's
clarify. Let me clarify that. So let's say you click on something you shouldn't have, and somebody has they have actual access to your machine. So they can see in their machine, they can go in there, they can see what you're doing, they can, they have access to your machine. So that's called a breach. Somehow they have breached your defenses and they are in your machine or your network, one of the two, depends how you're connected. And they have access to whatever's there. That's a breach. The average breach goes undetected for over 100 days.
Wow.
Because they want to take time to find out where they can have the most impact,
Sure. So as long as you're not clicking on anything that looks suspicious, if the email comes in and you don't click on something, then they don't have access. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the education you're referring to when you say education about emails is education to your employees about how to identify suspicious things?
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. How to identify them. And like I said, they get pretty good. Like I've gotten stuff that we actually use Insperity, believe it or not, at our company. And I've gotten stuff that looks so much like something from our payroll or something from our HR. I've clicked on those things despite being through the email education. I've clicked plenty of times and had to go through remediation training. So it's insidious. It really is.
Kevin, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't mean to override the conversation by any means. What we've been seeing are two big ones right now. And so what will happen is your email will get compromised and there'll be a forward to the hacker. So every time you email, they get a copy of it. After they have, say, 1,000 emails, they're going to data mine that email for words like invoice. And then they're going to have your customer's information. They're going to have your signature. they're going to send to your customer that says, pay this invoice. It's going to come from a different email address, but it has their name in the header. And so what we'll find is we'll go into that person's email box and look at the rules, and there's a forward going to that person, whoever that email address is. And the other thing we just saw, which I thought was amazing, is we have a company called Printers. Same similar thing. Somebody bought a domain name called Pro and sent invoices out to them minus one letter off the domain name, and they paid it. But it wasn't, they actually went and purchased the domain name to scam the client, so to speak. So those are the two big ones we've seen recently.
Yeah, very similar to what we're seeing as well. It's the low, they're looking for the easy stuff. You know, when I talk to people, we'll talk about ransomware and stuff, but like, how do I prevent ransomware? You know, that's harder work for them a lot of times. They're looking for the easy stuff. Sending an invoice from a vendor that's not going to your vendor happens all the time. Cool. All right, I'll keep pushing us forward here. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. So network infrastructure. There's some basic equipment that even when you got people that are, you know, working remote, which we all are, there's some basic equipment that we want to have in place just to make sure that the network is secure. So you know, business class firewalls, routers, if you've got servers, having VPNs, how are you using the cloud? How are you securing the network infrastructure in the cloud? All of these things are really important. I mean, even the cloud, I talk to small businesses a lot, say, oh, I just put everything in the cloud. I'm using Office 365. And we'll talk about backup here later, but you know, we asked the question, how is that being backed up? Like, what do you mean? Isn't that included in Microsoft? And in fact, you go really down deep into the user agreements for Office 365 and Microsoft 365. It's not. They're not necessarily backing it up. So chances are lower, but this network infrastructure needs to take into account where your people are accessing your systems. And so we want to make sure we have some basic infrastructure in place. Then they need to be properly configured to secure the system. We want to help in this capacity to avoid those network or web attacks that are coming in. And again, I mentioned this earlier, it's not necessarily that they're going to target your business. They're just going to throw stuff out there on the web and look for easy prey. And you know, they're not looking for a particular business, they're looking for vulnerabilities. And so if you have vulnerabilities out there, it's going to open up a potential security hole that will, again, get them access to your information, not through an email in this case, but just through a vulnerability in your network.
And I think
So,
what's also
ahead,
important
please.
here, I'm sorry.
Jump in whenever you want, Jackie.
Yeah,
this is both of us.
And I'm pretty sure that there's nothing else that this would be relevant to later in the presentation. So hopefully this is the right time for me to say this, but I think another good important thing to mention here are updates to all these machines. One thing that, you know, throughout this process and me being on board here, I would have never thought that firewalls need updates, and they do. I mean, you think you get the little pop-ups for your computer and your servers, like, oh, you have to update this to the latest, and that's got defenses in it so that you don't, you know, security, it's not just for the software, but security updates as well. And so you want to make sure that you have somebody, and the small to medium sized business normally doesn't have somebody on staff that's managing these updates. So you want to make sure that you have somebody who's paying attention to that, not just for the machines and clicking, oh, I'll do this, remind me later, but that you're actually doing all these updates on time when they're coming out to not just your machines, but your firewalls as well. So I think that's important to know. Super
important. Yeah, the bad guys, the bad actors we call them, they figure out how to break the systems. They figure out how to, you know, break into Windows, break into your firewalls, and so there's constantly updates that are fixing those holes. And it's like, you know, locking the doors. You just want to make sure you lock the doors. We lock the business doors up. We want to lock the cyber doors up as well. And actually, Jackie, that was a perfect timing here. Because the next slide here we talk about is what are some of the ways to do this. Remote monitoring and management is a critical component of this. So by having what are called agents that work on your behalf on your systems to monitor all of those systems, firewalls, computers, everything, and make sure that they are getting those updates, that something didn't miss for some reason. So it's security monitoring, performance checks, alerts if something's not going. It's basically keeping a 24/7 watch on all of your systems, computers, firewalls, you name it, and automating the maintenance of it, making sure your virus, antivirus, your spyware, your malware, your security patches, all those things are happening when they're supposed to happen. That whole out of sight, out of mind. Well, these agents keep 24/7 vigilance to make sure that stuff is happening and alert you if it doesn't. So that's a really key component of that. All of this is designed to help avoid production loss. So we want to make sure that that you're avoiding production loss, that if you have applications that fail, that's going to be a severe impact usually. I talk to businesses about cyber liability insurance a lot. That's another area of expertise that we have in. We work with a lot of insurance companies. In fact, I think that's how we got to know you guys ultimately was through an insurance agent to one of your clients. But we talk about not just, okay, well, I had a $50,000 ransomware, or I had a $50,000 invoice that I paid wrong, so I need a $50,000 cyber liability policy. That doesn't take into account, what if your systems are down for a week or a month? There's a direct consumer brand that I work with up in LA. They fashion business. They sell online. They sell some wholesale. They have about 18 stores. They had a ransomware that literally March or April of last year, so right when COVID was hitting, shut them down, including their backups. They had a heroic IT guy, took them like 120 hours of work to rebuild their systems, but they were completely out of all of their systems for like 2 weeks. Could you imagine if all of your systems for your business were down for 2 weeks, what kind of production loss that would have? It's amazing. So we want to make sure we can protect that. RMM, remote monitoring and management, that's our cloak. We want to make sure we have alerts before problems become problems, before they become an emergency, take care of them. So anybody have any questions about that concept of remote monitoring, making sure we're keeping our devices, our computers, security patches, all that done, and using a remote monitoring tool to make sure that's happening? Does that make sense to everybody? Make any questions?
And having somebody to watch it too.
Yeah.
And monitor those alerts is important. A lot of good they do if nobody's watching them.
This is true.
So I have a question, and you may be going here anyways, but we've got 8 different websites, and it seems like the websites are trying to be hacked all the time. And so we have somebody that hosts websites and is taking care of that security and monitoring there, but we're not doing anything on email. And how does a website versus email matter? And I don't know, just wanted your comment on it.
Sure. They're two different things, for one. And security, we always talk about a layered approach. Security is not one and done. You'll see I've continued to talk about different layers here, but they absolutely are different things. Email is its own thing. Your website is equally important. They shut down your website. It's like shutting down your business, but it's not just shutting it down. I'm not sure what platform you're using, but I'll use Shopify as an example, because I know a lot of small businesses use Shopify. We have a lot of clients with Shopify. Shopify is big company. They're doing what they can to be secure, but even them, they had a breach last year. It was internal. 2 of their employees got access to a bunch of customer information and breached it. But it's not just that. Your website doesn't run just by itself. There are a lot of I'm making an assumption here, but I've been around a little while, so I'm pretty sure this is the case. There's a lot of third-party apps that go into making that site work. And we're all pushing the digital business really, really hard because of COVID and just the nature of the world today, but the last year especially. We work with a lot of digital brands. In fact, we have a whole team that does digital website builds and digital marketing. It's a 38-person team, strong team, very, very in-depth experience there on the digital side as well. And so I can speak with a little bit of background here, but like back to Shopify and those third-party apps. And it doesn't matter if it's Shopify, it could be something else. There are a lot of apps that we use to run our businesses, right? How secure are those apps? How often do they have a breach? Because they have access potentially to your client information. They have access to your information. You have usernames and passwords that you use to access those apps. Most sites take somewhere upwards of 15 to 25 different third-party apps. In the case of Shopify, there's thousands of apps. It's a pretty low bar to build an app that works with Shopify. It is an unmanaged marketplace. Shopify is not managing that marketplace. They're not managing the security of those third-party apps. So it is a layered approach because it takes a lot of different things to have a digital business work these days, as you probably know more than I do. Keeping that information secure, monitoring the dark web is something we'll talk about a little bit later. These are all pieces of the layered approach to security. Did I answer the question? Okay.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, let's talk about backups. It's funny, we have this old image of this tape. I love it. But backups is another one of those multi-layered things. And having a physical offsite backup is actually an important component of it as well. You really got to make sure that you're backing up anything that you can't afford or want to lose. And I talk to businesses all the time that either not backing up or not testing whether they can restore from the backup as well. And that's the next piece of it is there are a lot of backup scenarios on site, cloud. You have to have it encrypted, file versus image. These are all things that an IT company can help you with, or someone who knows IT can help you with. But making sure that you have a cadence, that it's regularly happening, that you know if it doesn't, and that you regularly check that you could actually restore from it if you needed to. Most of the businesses that I talk to now, when we're seeing the ransomware things that are happening, they're also going after their backups. So they're not just ransoming the systems, they're ransoming the backups as well. And a lot of times companies have backups, but they have no idea whether they're going to be able to restore from them or not. So, this is just one of those best practices that's got to be in place for your business.
I think this goes back to the 100 days of the important part that I've learned throughout this with the retention part is that's probably one of the most important parts of the backup, because you could have a virus on your system or have been breached for 100 days, as we've learned today, and you have to be able to have the retention to go back and pull up your backup that is not infected. So it's not just keeping it for a week or two. It's keeping it for months to make sure that you've got a solid, good backup.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jackie.
That
Nick,
was
were
gonna
you
be,
going to say something?
that was going to be my question as well.
Okay,
Is that if they're continuing to watch you and they know that you back up, you save backups for 30 days, then they're going to just wait 30 days and then they have all of the backups infected.
That's why they're sitting there watching. When can they have the most impact? I have a friend of mine that private equity backed company in outside of New York. They were just getting ready for their IPO. It was like $15 million valuation or something like that. They had a ransomware hit for the exact amount that they needed for their IPO the day before. I mean, it's like there's only one way that happens. They've been really watching long enough that they know how to have that. So yeah, having the retention there is critical. Thanks for bringing that up, Jackie. So we want to avoid ransomware. I said I'd have a slide about this. I do. You guys probably all know what ransomware is, but just for the sake of saying it, it's software that locks or encrypts a person or company's data and holds it for ransom. Sometimes even paying it doesn't get it back, or it doesn't get it back the same way. It's not quite what you thought it was going to be. It's not like all of a sudden you can flip a switch and everything's back to normal necessarily. So this is really important. This is just something that we really want to avoid, ransomware. So all of these layered approaches of security are going to affect that. They're going to affect being able to do that. Having the backup is probably the most critical component of it, because then you just screw you. I'm not paying you anything. I got myself covered with my backups. But this is a really important part of it. As I mentioned, ransomware is not the largest source of breach. It's just the one that makes the news the most, because it's very impactful to a business. Anybody got any questions about ransomware or this piece?
Sure, I like to ask dumb questions. I don't really understand how ransomware works, and why does it matter to me? I mean,
That's great. I'm glad you asked, because we hear the term all the time, but that's actually why I had the slide on here. Let's talk about it. It literally is just somehow somebody got some software installed that locks up your systems, encrypts your data, and says you can't have it. So you have, maybe it's your customer data, maybe it's your entirety of your network infrastructure. There's a ton of infinite number of ways they can probably do it, but the bottom line is they have somehow locked you out of the systems that you need to run your business, and they say, if you pay me this money, I'll give it back. That's the gist of it when you cut to the core.
So you pay them and then they just say, well, I want more money. I mean,
there's no, you're dealing with criminals, right? It's just like, there's no guaranteeing that you're going to get all this stuff back. So, and even if you do, it might not be back in a usable fashion.
I believe the expression is honor among thieves.
Honor among thieves. Yeah, exactly.
I watched a little, I don't know if I call it a webinar or not, but from a ex-FBI guy, and he was saying that actually the ransomware criminals have been very upfront, as Nick is suggesting, because they want people to pay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they won't come back again to the same guy a couple months later, but
absolutely it does not. Yeah.
Observing the reality cam of you paid, they turn you back on. It seems to be the prevailing notion is they will turn you right back on. They may be back, but they'll turn you back on. So because they want the next company to pay.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Typical extortion thing, right?
It is. And you're right. I mean, the majority of the time they pay, it doesn't always. And you're right, they want people to pay. So the ideal world is we're not paying them, because then they'll stop doing it. But in order to do that, you have to have this layered approach. You have to be able to restore from backup, stuff like that. The cyber liability insurance business is booming right now. They're writing more policies than they ever have, and their growth is just through the roof because there's so much happening right now. But they are starting now, because people are paying, because they're paying out a lot. I mean, we all know how this goes. I think you guys are all in California. I'm in California, Southern California, Orange County specifically. But the more fires we have, the more insurance goes up. And it's the same thing here. So insurance policies are going up dramatically, and the restrictions on whether they'll actually underwrite you or not are going up. It used to be you checked a few boxes on the form and nobody really looked at it. No, they are scrutinizing these applications now, big time.
And also, this guy touched on that very topic. He said, just because you have insurance doesn't mean they will pay. That if when they swim back upstream, if you're not in compliance with the protocols, they say, I'm sorry, but you haven't been doing your part. We're not going to pay.
Happens more than we would like, and that's also why they're starting to restrict who they're going to approve or not.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, we work with insurance companies. We have a whole nother of these presentations. It's just geared to cyber liability insurance and how to be compliant with it. Yeah, and a lot of times a business will get that application from their insurance agent and be like, I have no idea what half of this stuff is. So going through it with someone who knows, and not just knows like the security side of it, but knows the insurance side of it as well, is important, because you want to make sure you buy that insurance so that you get paid if you need it. And that's what it really comes down to. If you find out that if the insurance company goes upstream and finds out there are some of the basics that are out, yeah, you're right. They're going to deny the claim, or they're going to come back at you for the money saying, no, you were in breach. And then there's all the other things, because then it's very public. So now you have potential fines. California's got among the most strict rules around privacy of consumer information as anywhere in the world, really. And so, there's fines and there's all sorts of stuff that comes with it if you get to that point.
Can't stress enough about ransomware. We've picked up probably 5 new clients. One paid in Bitcoin, and we've rebuilt so many systems. It's by far what we haven't had it happen to any of our clients, but we've picked up new ones. Even last Sunday, or Saturday and Sunday both, we were at a new client to help resolve the ransomware, and their on-site backups were encrypted as well. So they started from scratch versus pay for it.
And Matthew, how much was ransom were they asking the criminals roughly?
They usually ask for Bitcoins. One of our clients, when Bitcoin was down to 9,100, we paid I actually negotiated with them, which was, to me, it's a very strange situation. If you think of it like a business or a call center, they clock in, they clock out. They're not just some kid in a closet at his mom's house. It's a business. So I wrote, we went back and forth and we got it down to 1.5 Bitcoins. So it was 15,000, and they were down for 3 or 4 days. It was one of the worst I've ever seen. They did get the data back, but just like Kevin said, it was a nightmare. They sent a decryptor. It took us 3 days to run it against everything because it was so slow. And we had to keep running it because it just would fail on certain file lengths and things. It was just horrific, just terrible. But they called us out of the blue. So I hate to say, luckily, it wasn't one of our previous clients, but we learned a lot from it. So everything that Kevin says is I can't emphasize enough to listen to this gentleman.
And for every oil pipeline that you hear of ransomware on the news, there's $115,000 ransomware small businesses, probably.
Small businesses, you guys just get hit so much and
that don't make the news. Yeah.
If you have a basic Cox or Frontier firewall, it's not going to your big problems.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part is the small to medium sized businesses don't make the news. And part of the problem is a lot of them are going out of business because of it, because they cannot afford to keep their doors open after something like that. They just can't.
Well, the 40% survival rate is pretty shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did a survey last year. We have our corporate office in Phoenix. We're nationwide, so LA, Phoenix, New York. But anyway, we did a survey in Phoenix of small, medium-sized businesses and what they felt was the biggest threat. And they felt it was security, security and the privacy of data. And we asked another question, was, what happens if you don't do this well? What's the impact to your business? 70% of them said, I'd go out of business. I wouldn't be able to survive it if I got that hit. So, yep. Okay, let's plow forward, shall we? Oh, go ahead.
Kevin, that this whole thing has been a surprise to me, right? So, I mean, luckily, Nick and Rennie and I have zero assets, so I don't know what they would do to us. But the fact that this is such an existential threat to businesses, and the fact that as we did our little research to see how many people could join a nationwide call, it's very low.
I have a personal story because we're talking about businesses, but all this stuff can affect personal people too. My aunt, who luckily didn't have anything on her computer, she was like, this guy's calling me. He's telling me I need to pay him a couple of $100s. And my dad's calling my husband, like, what do we do? And I think about, in my situation, we have got, I mean, years and years worth of photos of our kids, and you can't put a price on that. If somebody got to your personal computer and the things that you save on your personal computer nowadays, you can't replace stuff like that. I mean, what would you be willing to pay? I mean, I'd give them the shirt off of my back to get the pictures of my kids back. So, it's scary because it's not just businesses too.
It's like Matt was saying, it's not some random guy in his garage. There are businesses that this is how they operate, syndicates.
Yeah. All right,
okay.
Press on. It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fortunately, there are things to do about it. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the next one. It's a very relevant topic here. So where does all this information go? Well, it goes to the dark web. When I first learned about the dark web, it was eye-opening. Like, what the heck is the dark web, right? I love this picture of the iceberg because it's great. So the World Wide Web, www, that we interact with, right? That's where your websites are, all that kind of fun stuff. 4% of the internet, 4%. 90% deep web. That's like government resources, academic information, not accessible by via search engines, medical records, subscription. And then the dark web. That's the scary stuff. I have a son who is finished his third year of schooling at Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona, and he's a cybersecurity and intelligence major with a forensic accounting minor. and very, very detailed stuff. And he has to do stuff with the dark web sometimes, and he is terrified of it. And this is a guy who knows how to protect all this stuff. He builds his own box, disconnects it from I mean, the stuff he goes through just to do his schooling interaction with this is alarming. So that's what the dark web is. It's where all these criminals hang out and sell information, illegal pornography, drug trafficking. Also, that's where all the illegal stuff is, but larger, 50% larger than the World Wide Web. And you think about how big the World Wide Web is. That's mind-boggling to think of that dark web. So this is where it all goes. And this is one of the things that we're doing for companies, is doing a complimentary scan of dark web. Let's see what's there. I always find stuff. I very rarely have unless they have a really good IT company that they're working with. It's not a matter of whether it's going to get there or not. It's what do you do with it when it gets there? Because you can't control it. I mentioned the third-party apps for websites as an example. You can't control if they're going to get breached or not. They might, and then all of a sudden your username and password is available. So here's why that's a problem. A few years ago, when we started getting into the dark web monitoring, the company did a scan of all the employees here, our company, One Step, and turns out my name came up for my LinkedIn password. I didn't really think much of it, but few months later, not sure how long it was, I was getting a pizza delivered from Domino's in Baltimore. Well, as I mentioned, I live in Mission Viejo, so that was a flag. They had my credit card information from Domino's, because I had a similar password. All my financial accounts were secured really well, but I had a similar password between my Domino's account and my LinkedIn account, okay, because this is back before a password vault. Anyway, fast forward again, I was on a business trip. I was in New York, then down to DC. I get a call when I was in DC from Verizon. They called me and they're like, hey, were you just in Manhattan, and were you just buying phones? I said, no, that's not me. Right? No, that's not me. No. And I was already a little nervous because Domino's thing, stuff like that. Anyway, I helped them verify my account. They said, we'll take care of it for you. I was all good. I was staying at my sister and brother-in-law's, and I had a big meeting the next morning. All of a sudden, it's like midnight, and I lying there like something's not right. I called Verizon. That nice old lady that called me was not with Verizon. That was the criminal, and they were in my Verizon account online, but Verizon has two-factor authentication, right? You got to get the text to put in the code. Never, ever, ever give someone that code off of the text if they call you, by the way. So I learned that one the hard way. They had actually gotten into my account then, fully gotten into my account, went into a store in San Bernardino, upgraded my son's phone and got a new iPhone. They added a new line to my account, got a new iPhone. It cost about $2,500 when it was all done, and a whole bunch of pain to try and fix the accounts that they had messed up.
Wow.
That is what can happen with the information on the dark web. It wasn't necessarily an important account. It wasn't even my Verizon account. They just learned a little bit about me and was able to go and learn more and learn more. And that's how it can happen. So this is an important thing. You want to avoid identity theft. We want to monitor the dark web. You can see that stat right there. Information is compromised and on sale for an average of 15 months before you find the breach. So getting proactive monitoring alerts. Now, on a personal level, you can get these from a lot of the credit reporting agencies are starting to offer this stuff too. But from a business level, you want to make sure you're monitoring that dark web, and if something does come up, take immediate action. Which leads us to passwords. Long, strong, complex, mixed. Change them every 90 days. If you're dealing with direct to consumer sales, if you're dealing with PCI, you got to have certain things like 90 days. Every 90 days, you got to change your passwords. These are requirements to maintain PCI compliance. This is impossible to do without some type of a password vault. So there's lots of them out there. It's something that we offer to all of our clients as part of our security suite. But having something that not just you, but your employees use to manage their passwords is just one of the best things that you can do to keep this stuff secure. All right, so 80% of breaches leverage either stolen or weak passwords. It really comes down to this. So I'll stop there for a second. We're talking about the dark web and password vaults. And everybody know what a password vault is? Sorry, I use that term.
Please explain.
Yeah, it's some type of tool that is keeping track of your passwords for you. I know one password. That's the password to get into my LastPass. I use LastPass personally. We use other stuff corporately for employees and for our clients. But it's something that is encrypting and storing all of your passwords, and it's randomly generating them. I have no idea what any of my passwords are. I have one password. That's the only one I need to know, and it's to my password vault. And that password vault keeps.
I have to say I'm 50% there because I have no idea of any of my passwords either.
Well, the question is, does anybody else, or does a password vault?
They could let me know, it would be great.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that having a Google Doc with all of your passwords on it is not safe?
Hypothetically, of course.
Hypothetically,
of
asking
course.
for a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
no,
is
definitely.
is the Google Doc printed out? I mean, can you see it visually? Because maybe that would make a difference. We'll have to ask.
If I
That
was
was a
to
joke.
ask my friend, it would not be printed out.
Yeah, no, so just from a personal basis, we're just talking really. LastPass is great. My son, who studies cybersecurity, actually has a degree in it, recommends LastPass. That's a great one for personal and for family and stuff. But at a business level, something that you give your staff that maintains, that level of security is a really critical component up here. As you can see, 80% of the breaches are stolen or weak passwords. And that's why also monitoring the dark web is important, because you may have a password that's just been breached because it's out there. This is where you get the consistency of passwords. If there's 30 different apps that you have to log into to run your business all the time, and there's some level of consistency between them to help you remember, one of those could breach and it could have nothing to do with anything you did. It could have been, Experian just breached. What was one that was last week, Jackie? There was like a huge one. Billions of passwords were breached.
Of course, you would ask me that.
I mean, it happens so often, I don't even really pay attention to it as much
Well, yeah,
anymore.
we get emails about it every day. I mean, there's so many.
Anyway, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could just Google it and it'd probably come up recent breaches, and you'll see a whole slew of them. I mean, there's websites that list it by month and day.
Yeah.
On things, and it's not just here in the United States, but globally. I mean, you can see exactly which companies are having the problems.
So here's an
These
interesting.
vaults are protected in a way that prevents breaches to the password vaults.
Yeah. That's the important part of it. But it's not just your password and it could be you that's breached, but monitoring the dark web, because getting into your password vault is going to be very hard. Breaking into some other system is probably easier. So changing them regularly, and your Windows passwords or your computer passwords, those are most important. But as I mentioned, it's not necessarily something you did. It could be something someone else did, but your username and password was breached. So that's the thing that you want to pay attention to. And this has impact on not just protecting your business, but on how you're viewed in the world. We all know Bonobos. I mean, a lot of you are selling online. Bonobos is kind of one of the better known brands from a customer service standpoint. They built the brand on great service, right? And treating their customers amazingly well. Towards the end of last year, they were breached. 14 million customer records, usernames and passwords were breached. How does that affect their images? We put the customer first. Well, you just breached all the customers' usernames and passwords to the dark web. It's there. It's now all available. So you have to notify all your customers. I'm sorry, we had a breach. As a customer of a brand, that's not an email I like getting. I've gotten them, but I don't like getting them, and it affects your reputation with your customers. It kind of goes to the next step. How does this affect our community? So here's an incident. This hacking group, Mage Cart, they uploaded some skimmer code onto this website. It went undetected for 2 months, and it affected 200,000 customers who made purchases over the course of 2 months. The info stolen was names, addresses, credit card numbers, codes on the credit card numbers, expiration dates. So what is this website skimmer code? What is this stuff? This is code that's embedded into web payment pages. It's designed to sit there and steal customer payment information. So
this actually goes back to what, and I'm looking because I don't want to misspeak his name, what Cam had mentioned about the websites. This is actually a perfect example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So Cam, you said you had eight websites, right? 8 different websites. Yeah. I mean, this is a clear example of what could happen on the websites. You could get some website skimmer code on one of them. You don't even know about it, but next thing you know, you've got a bunch of customers' information that's breached. So that's an incident I want to talk about. And I think Adam, you were saying you're developing your app now, so you got the mobile responsive site, but an app is an entirely different thing, a whole new level of security. I'm sure you're learning about that has to go into that thing.
Right. That's just what I'm starting to dive into.
Yeah. There's all these things that we want to do to engage with our customer more, right? Curbside pickup, interacting with Google and the other kind of delivery or online ordering things, all these little integrations that make all this cool omni-channel digital world work. Every one of those touch points has vulnerabilities that we just want to be aware of and protect against. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm saying we have to be aware of how to protect against them.
Omni-channel has vulnerability.
Yeah, it's omni vulnerable. It's just touch points. Anytime you have digital touch points between systems, you have a potential area that you got to keep an eye on. Okay, so there's one incident. Here's another one. Another specialty retail company. Unauthorized third-party access their accounts using their own login credentials via credential stuffing. What's that? That's where they use collection of usernames and passwords either purchased on the dark web or were previously leaked from security breaches. There's just an example of it. We do, it's interesting to see, sometimes we do vulnerability scans. We'll do like complimentary or paid, we do them both, but we do a pen test, a penetration test, where basically we'll click on something and it takes a look at your systems to see what would happen if you did click on something that you shouldn't do, and it looks at all the things. Anyway, here's a way they did that. They did credential stuffing. In this term, they took the last 4 digits of the credit card numbers, the expiration dates, the billing information, the customer name and address they had as well. Why do they do this? They're just trying to steal money, gather personal information. Again, this stuff has value. The average value of personal information on the dark web, $242. That's what they can get selling it. So they're going to try and get it. So there's another incident. Here's a third one. Again, small, medium-sized retail. This affects, I talked about the Bonobos incident, this affects consumers. 78% of consumers stated in the survey that they would stop engaging with a brand online after a breach. Now, you're required by law to notify your customers if there's a breach that affected their personal information. 78% of those customers will no longer engage with you if that were the case. And in 2020, 24% of all cyber attacks targeted retailers. Believe it or not, retail, and I want to be clear, retail is not just brick and mortar retail. This is anybody selling product directly to consumers. Those are retailers. It's the largest targeted industry. Now, it might be partly because it's the largest industry. I mean, retail is huge, right? But we did an ebook on cyber threats to retailers this year, it was the #1 source. So we got a whole bunch. Jackie's going to talk more about that ebook actually here in a little bit. First half of 2019, 4.1 billion records were compromised. 2 out of 3 retailers targeted by ransomware. 2 out of 3 targeted, and 95% of breaches start with human error. So the numbers tell the tale here. 43% of cyber attacks are aimed at small and medium-sized businesses, but only 14% are prepared to defend themselves. 60% have no digital plan in place, digital defense plan. There's that 101 days on average before they're notified, and 60% go out of business within 6 months. Sorry, terrible negative slide there. But anyway, you guys could get an idea of what happens here. So this is where we want to be proactive in protecting it. Understand what the risk is. Have a backup plan. Stay up to date on your updates. Layer up. Let's get some security. Not lawyer up. Layer up. We want to get some security layers in place. You want to maintain your compliance standards. You want to create a breach response plan. What are we going to do if it does happen? Avoid storing sensitive data, and definitely you want to secure secure your website, I would add in here, have a cyber liability insurance policy that you're compliant to. I would add that. We missed that one, but I would definitely add that. Train your employees how to protect your business. Train them how to report suspicious activity. Use passwords or a password vault. Get those phishing simulations. I talked about email education, but simulations are great. Verify downloads, limit access user rights. This is another one I see a lot when we do kind of evaluations for a lot of businesses, is that they don't have like policies in place of who has access to what and why. Anyway, and we want to help you join the 60s club. That's what we're all about. We want to protect you from joining the 60s club. Sorry, misspoke. 62% lack the in-house skills, 68% don't have a disaster plan, 60% will go out of business within 6 months. This is from FEMA. So that's kind of what we do. You know, we help with all of this stuff, as well as a deep focus on retail. So a lot of our retail clients, direct-to-consumer brands, are using us for their software, their website, digital consulting, inventory planning, but at the core of our managed IT services, it's help desk, cloud storage, managed backup, all the things that we talked about for you. And we're very passionate. Hopefully that goes through here. So I mentioned dark web scan a couple times. Jackie's going to offer this, you know, for any of you guys. If you want one, we'll do a complimentary dark web scan for you here as well. We were going to send you out a copy of the ebook we did on cybersecurity for retail. Very light reading, you'll love it.
Yeah, it probably would take less time to read well, probably about the same amount of time as what we've spent in this meeting. It's quick, it's very factual, quick reading. Bob's read it. Nick, I think, have you had a chance to read it yet?
Yes. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
good.
so it's real quick. It's got a lot of great information that I think would be relevant to all of you. I mean, really, if you guys are using computers and technology, it's going to be relevant to you. So I'm going to put it in the chat right now.
The only thing that I would caution people, read. It's a really great read, by the way. It's really well done. But retail means anybody selling to the consumer.
Yes.
You don't care how. So
that's right.
As soon as I understood that, it became a lot more relevant. It's
Mhm.
not brick and mortar.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Yep. And with that, that's it. Thank you guys. So we'll still stay on. Hopefully the time was well used, and
Okay.
you know, any questions that you guys have, we're here.